Hello, everyone. It is an honor to be joining you today to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. My name is Creighton, and I am a member of Qiao Collective. Today, I would like to address and challenge the prevailing attitude of the Western left towards the People's Republic of China, beginning with a short reflection on my time in the country in 2019. 5 years ago, I was fortunate enough to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the PRC from inside the country. It was a bittersweet occasion, marking the year that the PRC surpassed the USSR in longevity. This milestone represented the endurance of China's revolutionary process and the stability of the world's largest socialist state. It also served as a reminder that the more empowered socialist China becomes, the more US imperial aggression against it intensifies. In the same year, China weathered a color revolution attempt in Hong Kong and a media blitz on Xinjiang. 2 months later, the discovery of the novel coronavirus would unleash a new wave of xenophobic propaganda and plunge the world into crisis. Back then, what brought me back to my country of origin was a desire to understand China from a Chinese perspective, untainted by the distortions of my Western bourgeois education. During my undergraduate studies, I realized that the radical theories and anti-capitalist politics I had been exposed to were inadequate to properly analyze and appreciate the PRC. After becoming disillusioned with my Western liberal arts education, I became increasingly convinced of the validity of Marxism-Leninism and the sincerity of the Communist Party of China. The process of re-educating myself called my entire educational history into question, and in particular, opened my eyes to the perversions of Marxism that have contributed to the Western left's ahistorical and undialectical analyses of China. One of the best resources that anti-imperialists in the West can use to understand this phenomenon is Western Marxism by the late Domenico Losordo. This book traces the bifurcation of Western and Eastern forms of Marxism and highlights the need for Western Marxism to rediscover the revolutionary core of dialectical materialism and be rejuvenated as an anti-imperialist practice. The Western Marxism that Losordo speaks of is not merely a geographic category, but refers to the commodified, chauvinist, and accommodationist form that is marketed by the academic presses and intellectuals of the imperial core as the best inheritor of the Marxist tradition. Whereas Western Marxism is largely confined to academic critique and characterized by its defeatism, utopianism, and anti-communism, Eastern Marxism, on the other hand, found practical application in the anti-colonial revolutions of the 20th century and is still being advanced by the socialist states of today. I will now pivot to read a short excerpt from the appendix of Western Marxism, summarizing the main points of the book. In the West, Marxism was schooled primarily in condemning the destructive consequences of inter-imperialist rivalry and war, while in the East, the October Revolution found an extraordinary echo thanks to the call to the, quote, slaves in the colonies, unquote, to break the chains of oppression and national humiliation. In the West, the nation state was the bloodthirsty Moloch that sacrificed millions of people to the greed for power and interests of big business. In the East, it was a question of shaking off the colonial yoke and putting an end to the genocidal and enslaving practices used by the great capitalist powers against the, quote, barbarians, unquote. In the two zones into which the world was divided, imperialism was experienced in different ways. There is no contradiction, but rather a full convergence between these two aspects. But have Western and Marxism ever met? Has the first ever really grasped the second? Since the initial difficulties and tragedies of the system that emerged from the October Revolution became apparent, but especially since the crisis of, quote, real socialism, unquote, became clear, the split between Eastern and Western Marxists has led to the fact that Marxists in power and Marxists in opposition, the latter increasingly focused on critical theory, deconstruction, and the condemnation of power and of power relations in general, are alien to each other. And so Western Marxism was born, which increasingly understood its distance from power as a favorable condition for the rediscovery of an authentic Marxism that was no longer reduced to a state ideology. In Western left discourse, it's not uncommon to hear arguments that China is imperialist, that China has betrayed its revolution and restored capitalism, that it has turned its back on the global South, etc. Western Marxists have built entire careers criticizing actually existing socialism, most notably in the Chinese form, demonizing it as authoritarian, campist, statist, etc., while sowing confusion about actually existing imperialism. These are fundamental misapprehensions of China in the world we live in. Within the imperial core, solidarity with China is an embattled position against the Western left intelligentsia's reflexive anti-communism, rejection of the national question, and anti-materialist conceptions of imperialism. Marxists supportive of China are put in a defensive position from the start. These are the terms of discourse that bourgeois institutions have set for us and that we must refuse if an anti-imperialist Marxism is to develop in the West. In Western Marxism, Lusordo observed that the, quote, war that the United States is preparing for is against China, the country born of the greatest anti-colonial revolution in history and directed by an experienced communist party, unquote. As the PRC enters its 75th year of struggle under intensifying imperialist aggression, there should be no doubts on the left about China's role as a world historical progressive force, its socialist character, or the positive relationship between Chinese sovereign development and the growth of its capacity for people's war. Additionally, we must understand that Western Marxists' disavowal of actually existing socialism is a class position, and not just the product of propaganda or ignorance. When I look back on my experiences during Golden Week in China in 2019, I think of the ideological freedom and inspiration that I found in China. Outside of the suffocating atmosphere and nihilism of the US, I did not have to self-censor myself, preface discussion of China with critique, or dilute my enthusiasm for Chinese socialism. I would like to thank the Friends of Socialist China for organizing today's event, which has afforded me the same discursive freedom that I enjoyed in China, and for convening this group of panelists who share a commitment to reigniting anti-imperialist Marxism in solidarity with the PRC. Thank you.